The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for 11,000 years. In all that time, they had met thousands of species. Some were powerful. Some were clever. Some had gifts that made them useful to the great machine of galactic civilization. And then there were humans. When the Concord survey ships first found Earth, they did not know what to think. The planet was a mess. Volcanoes erupted without warning. The ground shook and split open. Storms tore across the surface with terrible fury. Ice covered the poles while deserts burned at the equator. It was as if the planet itself was trying to kill everything living on it, and yet somehow life survived. More than survived. It thrived. The survey team studied the dominant species with growing confusion. Humans had no natural weapons. Their skin was soft and easily damaged. They could not see in the dark. They could not hear sounds that other species heard easily. They had no venom, no claws, no armor. They could not breathe underwater or fly through the air, by every measure the Concord used. Humans were weak, but they had built cities. They had split the atom. They had walked on their own moon. And most disturbing of all, they had nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons not once, but several times, and somehow pulled back from the edge each time. The Concord scientists argued for months about what to do with Earth. Some wanted to study these strange creatures. Others wanted to leave them alone and check back in a few thousand years. A few even suggested that humans might have potential. Their strange persistence might be worth something. In the end, the Concord chose the easiest path. They assigned humanity to Tier 17, the lowest classification possible. It meant humans were considered incapable of contributing anything meaningful to galactic civilization. They were too primitive, too violent, too limited, and Tier 17 species had a purpose. They became dumping grounds. Ambassador Yenthi of the Selphorian Dominion was given the task of informing humanity of their status. She traveled to Earth with a small fleet, expecting fear and confusion from the primitive natives. Instead, she found a delegation of calm, quiet humans waiting for her in a building they called the United Nations. The lead negotiator was a woman named Sarah Chen. She had gray in her hair and lines on her face that spoke of many hard years. When Yenthi explained that Earth would become a reclamation zone, a place where the galaxy's garbage would be sent, Chen simply nodded. "What kind of materials will we receive?" Chen asked. Yenthi was surprised by the question. Most species begged for mercy at this point. They promised to be useful. They offered anything to avoid becoming a cosmic trash heap. Chen just wanted specifications. Broken ship components, Yenthi said, recovering her composure. Failed experiments? Depleted power cores. Contaminated materials. Anything the Concord deems too damaged or dangerous to recycle through proper channels? Chen wrote this down on a small device. And how often will deliveries occur? Continuously. The debris will be teleported to your orbital space and allowed to fall naturally, I see. Chen looked up from her notes. Is there anything else? Yenthi stared at the human woman. There was no fear in her eyes. No anger. Nothing but calm acceptance and what might have been the smallest hint of something else. Something that made Yenthi uncomfortable, though she could not say why. We will return in 50 years to assess the situation, Yenthi said. Standard protocol for Tier 17 species. Chen nodded. We understand. Thank you for your time, Ambassador. And that was it. The humans thanked her. Thanked her for telling them they were worthless. Thanked her for turning their world into a garbage dump. Yenthi returned to her ship feeling strangely unsettled. Though she told herself she had no reason to be, the Selphorians laughed about it for years afterward. The humans had not even protested. They had simply accepted their fate, like the primitive creatures they were. What Yenthi did not know, what the entire Concord failed to understand, was that humanity had spent its entire existence turning nothing into something. When the first debris began falling from the sky, governments around the world panicked. The chunks of alien material crashed into oceans and deserts and empty fields. Some pieces were the size of houses. Others were no bigger than a person's fist. All of them were strange and unknown and potentially dangerous. Director. Sarah Chen watched the first impacts from a bunker deep underground. Around her sat the leaders of every major nation on Earth, gathered in secret for what she called the Global Reconstruction Council. "They think they have cursed us," Chen said quietly. "They think they have buried us under their garbage, and we will simply suffocate." She pulled out a tablet and showed them images of the fallen debris. Broken ship hulls made of metals that did not exist on Earth. Cracked power cores still humming with energy. Strange devices covered in alien writing that no human could read. "But they have made a terrible mistake," Chen continued. "Every piece of debris that falls contains information. These broken ships show us how they were built. These failed experiments tell us what other species tried and why it did not work. These discarded power cores still hold data about energy systems we have never imagined." She stood and faced the assembled leaders. "For the first time in human history, we have access to the knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. Yes, it comes to us as garbage. Yes, it is broken and damaged and incomplete. But when has that ever stopped us?" The room was silent. Everyone remembered their history. Humans had built pyramids with nothing but muscle and stone. They had crossed oceans in wooden ships. They had learned to fly in machines made of cloth and wire. They had walked on the moon using computers less powerful than a modern calculator. "They gave us 50 years, Chen said. 50 years before they check on us again? That is how little they think of us. That is how certain they are that we will fail." She smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. Something that the comfortable species of the Concorde had long forgotten. It was the look of a survivor. The look of a species that had crawled out of the mud and refused, absolutely refused, to stay down. "Let us show them what humans do with garbage," Chen said. "Let us show them what happens when you give us the pieces to every puzzle in the galaxy." She looked at the screens showing debris falling like rain across the planet. "In 50 years, they will return expecting to find us dying in the dirt. Instead, they will find something that will make them wish they had never heard of Earth." The work began that very night, and it did not stop for 50 years. 23 years had passed since the first alien debris fell on Earth. The surface of the planet looked exactly as the Concorde expected. Impact craters dotted the landscape. Mountains of twisted metal and broken machinery rose from the deserts. Cities struggled under the constant rain of garbage from the sky, at least. That was what the Concorde's surveillance drones saw, and they occasionally passed through the solar system. They never looked beneath the surface. Chief Engineer Marcus. Webb stood in a cavern so large it could hold a small city. The ceiling stretched hundreds of meters above his head, supported by columns of alien metal that humans had learned to shape and grow like living things. This was the forge, humanity's greatest secret. Buried deep beneath the Sahara Desert, and in the center of the forge, something impossible was taking shape. The warship was 3 kilometers long. Its hull was made of Kaolani metametal, a substance the Concorde had declared impossible to work with. The Kaolani themselves had given up on it centuries ago, throwing away millions of tons of the material because they could not make it do what they wanted. Human metallurgists had solved the puzzle in 6 months. Dr. Mara Okonkwo walked up to Webb, her tablet glowing with data. She was the head of Xenotechnology Integration, which meant her job was to make alien technologies work together even when they were never designed to. "The latest batch of Krethvani drive cores arrived yesterday," she said. "Their faster-than-light system is fascinating. They use quantum tunneling, bending space in ways we never imagined possible." "But," Webb asked. He had worked with Okonkwo long enough to hear when she had something more to say. "But their implementation is wasteful. Their drives burn out after about 200 jumps. The cores we received were all failures, discarded because they died even faster. We figured out why, and we fixed it. How long will our drives last? Forever if we maintain them properly. We combined their quantum tunneling with the self-repairing crystal matrices the Selforian Dominion threw away last year. They said the crystals were unstable. They were right. But we found a way to stabilize them using more thought containment fields." Webb shook his head slowly. This was how it always went. One species developed technology in isolation, following their own path, limited by their own assumptions. They made something that worked well enough for their purposes, and they stopped there. They never imagined combining it with anything else. But humanity received pieces from everyone. Broken pieces? Yes. Failed experiments? Certainly. But pieces nonetheless. And humans had a gift that no other species seemed to possess. They could see how things fit together. The warship in the forge was proof of that gift. Its weapons came from 7 different species. Its shields layered 3 separate defensive technologies that had never been designed to interact. Its sensors combined the best elements of a dozen different scanning systems. Nothing about it should work. Everything about it worked beautifully. A young technician named Jinsu Park approached with a small device in his hands. He was barely 20 years old, part of the first generation born after the debris started falling. To him, alien technology was not strange or frightening. It was simply another tool to be understood and improved. Chief Engineer Jinsu said, "I finished the modifications to the waste reclamation system." Webb raised an eyebrow. The waste reclamation system was not exactly a priority. It was meant to handle garbage and sewage aboard the ship, nothing more. What modifications? I combined the Ireni matter converter with the Kilani molecular assembler. The system can now break down any matter into its basic components and reassemble them into whatever we need. Ginsu shrugged as if this was obvious. It means the ship will never need supplies. We can turn captured enemy weapons into food. We can turn asteroid dust into ammunition. We can turn debris into fuel. Webb stared at the young man. He understood what Jinsu was saying, but he was not sure the technician understood what he had done. "You made the ship self-sustaining," Webb said slowly. "It can fight forever. It never needs to return to port. It never needs a supply line." Jinsu nodded. "That was the idea. Was that wrong?" "Wrong?" The boy had just made their warship functionally immortal. It could cross the galaxy without stopping. It could fight wars that lasted centuries. It could survive anything as long as there was matter nearby to consume. "No," Webb said quietly. "That was not wrong at all." He looked up at the massive ship taking shape above them. They had named it the Defiance, though some of the workers called it the Spite. Either name fit. It was humanity's answer to a galaxy that had looked at them and seen nothing worth respecting. In another part of the forge, teams of scientists were working on the ship's true secret weapon, not its guns or its shields or its drives. Something far more important. They called it the Swarm. Millions of small units, each no larger than a human fist. Alone, they were nothing. But together, working as one, they could become anything. They could form into weapons platforms, or repair drones, or shield generators, or entirely new ships. They could take apart enemy vessels piece by piece. They could rebuild themselves from any available material. The idea had come from watching Earth insects. Ants and bees and termites, creatures that accomplished impossible things through cooperation. Humanity had combined that biological inspiration with alien technology, creating something the galaxy had never seen, a fleet that could think, a fleet that could adapt, a fleet that could grow 20-7 more years past. The debris kept falling. The Concorde kept ignoring Earth, and humanity kept building. On the day before the Concorde inspection fleet was scheduled to arrive, Director Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, stood on the bridge of the completed Defiance. She was old now, her hair white, her body frail, but her eyes were still sharp, still fierce. Still burning with the same determination she had shown 50 years ago? "Status report," she said. "All systems operational," her first officer replied. "The swarm is in position. Ground defenses are standing by. We are ready." Chun nodded slowly. She thought about the ambassador who had come to Earth 50 years ago, so certain of human weakness. She thought about the Concorde, so comfortable in their power, so blind to anything that did not fit their expectations. "They threw their garbage at us," Chen said softly. "They thought they were burying us. Instead, they gave us everything we needed." She looked out at the stars, knowing that tomorrow everything would change. Now it is time to return the favor. High Arbiter Kethmara of the Selforian Dominion was bored. The inspection of Earth was supposed to be a simple task, the last duty before her retirement. She would look at the garbage world, confirm that the primitive humans were still struggling to survive, and return home to her estates. Her fleet was small because it did not need to be large. 3 destroyers, 1 command cruiser, and the observation vessel, Eternal Witness. Standard equipment for monitoring a Tier 17 species. More than enough to handle any trouble from creatures who had barely discovered electricity when the Concorde first found them. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Kethmara barely looked up from her personal communications. She had already written her report in her head. Humans still primitive. Planet still covered in debris. No signs of meaningful development. Recommend continued reclamation status. Arbiter, her sensor officer, said. His voice sounded strange. You should see this. Kethmara sighed and looked at the main display. Earth hung in the distance, a blue and green sphere, surrounded by the expected cloud of orbital debris. Everything looked normal. Then the debris moved. At first, Kethmara thought it was an error in the sensors. Space garbage did not move with purpose. But as she watched, the millions of fragments surrounding Earth began to flow together like water. They spun and shifted and connected, forming shapes that grew larger with every passing second. What is happening? Kethmara demanded. No one answered. They were all staring at the display with the same frozen shock. The debris was becoming weapons platforms, defense satellites, support vessels, and at the center of the swirling mass, something enormous was taking shape. Something that dwarfed Kethmara's command cruiser. Something that should not exist. The EU's Defiance emerged from the swarm like a monster rising from the ocean. Its hull was a patchwork of colors and textures, metal and crystal and materials Kethmara did not recognize. It was ugly. It was crude. It looked like something a child might build from broken toys, and it was the most terrifying thing she had ever seen. Her tactical officer was the first to find his voice. Arbiter, I am detecting weapon systems. Multiple weapon systems. They appear to be... He stopped, checked his readings, and checked them again. They appear to be a combination of Selforian, Krethvani, Morthok, Ireni, and at least 6 other species technologies, all integrated into a single platform. That is impossible, Kethmara said automatically. Those systems are not compatible. They cannot work together. They're working, Arbiter, and they are targeting us. A communication signal came through. Kethmara accepted it, expecting to see some terrified human face begging for mercy. Instead, she saw an old human woman with white hair and calm eyes. The woman sat in a command chair that looked like it had been built from the bridge of a Kalani battleship. High Arbiter Kethmara, the woman said. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Defiance. On behalf of humanity, I have a message for the Galactic Concorde. Kethmara's training took over. Her voice became cold and commanding. You will power down your weapons and submit to inspection immediately. Tier 17 species do not address the Concorde in this manner. You do not have the right to Tier 17, Chen interrupted. There was something in her voice that Kethmara had never heard from a human. Amusement. We spent 50 years studying your technology, Arbiter. All of it. Every piece you threw away because you could not make it work. Every failed experiment. Every broken system. Round the Defiance, the swarm continued to shift and change. More weapons platforms appeared. More defense satellites locked into position. The cloud of debris that Kethmara had dismissed as garbage was revealing itself as a fleet. You gave us the pieces to 1,000 puzzles, Chen continued, and we solved all of them. One of Kethmara's destroyer captains panicked. His ship opened fire, launching a full spread of plasma torpedoes at the human vessel. It was a powerful attack, enough to destroy a small moon. The torpedoes hit the Defiance's shields and simply stopped. The energy did not dissipate. It did not scatter. The shields absorbed it completely. And then, impossibly, The Defiance's weapons began to glow brighter. "Thank you for the ammunition," Chen said. Her voice had not changed at all. "Your weapons use plasma energy. Our shields convert plasma energy into power for our systems. Every shot you fire makes us stronger." Kethmera felt something she had not felt in centuries. Fear. "What do you want?" she asked. "I told you. I have a message for the Concord." Chen leaned forward slightly. "Humanity formally requests reclassification. We believe Tier 1 is appropriate. We expect this request to be granted immediately. Tier 1, the highest classification. Reserved for the founding species of the Concord. Species that had shaped galactic civilization for thousands of years. The idea of giving that status to humans was absurd. It was insulting. It was, and if we refuse?" Kethmera asked. Chen smiled. It was not a threatening smile. It was the smile of someone who already knew how this conversation would end. "We have spent 50 years preparing for this moment, Arbiter. 50 years of learning everything you know. 50 years of combining your technologies in ways you never imagined. 50 years of building weapons you cannot stop and ships you cannot destroy." She gestured at the display behind her. It showed the Defiance's tactical readout. Every ship in Kethmera's fleet was targeted. Every weakness had been identified. Every possible escape route had been blocked. "We could destroy you right now," Chen said. "We could destroy every fleet the Concord sends against us. We could fight a war that lasts 1,000 years, and we would win because every battle would make us stronger." She paused, letting that sink in. "But that is not what we want. We did not build this ship to conquer. We built it to prove a point. You looked at us and saw garbage. You looked at our world and saw a dumping ground. You were wrong." Kethmera said nothing. What could she say? "Go back to your Concord," Chen said. "Tell them what you saw. Tell them that the species they dismissed as worthless has surpassed them all. And tell them that we are willing to share what we have learned if they are willing to treat us as equals." The communication ended. The human ship did not fire. The swarm did not attack. They simply waited, giving Kethmera a choice. She chose wisely. The Selphorian fleet turned and fled at maximum speed. Kethmera spent the entire journey home trying to write a report that the Concord would believe. She failed. The truth was simply too impossible. But that did not make it any less true. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every species in the Concord knew what had happened in the Sol system. Within days, the Emergency Council had gathered on the station called Harmony's Light. This had not happened in 300 years. The last Emergency Council had been called when a rogue artificial intelligence threatened to destroy an entire sector. That crisis had been terrifying. This was worse. The 12 founding species of the Concord sent their highest representatives. They gathered in a chamber designed to impress, with walls that showed live images of 1,000 different worlds. Usually, these images reminded the representatives of their power. Today, they reminded them of everything they had to lose. "It must be a trick," the Ireni delegate said. Her crystalline body vibrated with agitation, throwing small rainbows across the walls. Some kind of deception. No species advances this quickly. The mathematics of technological development clearly showed the mathematics assumed they would develop their own technology. "Okay," interrupted Delegate Vorn of the Krethvani. He was a massive creature, his armored body built for a world with twice Earth's gravity. "We did not give them a chance to do that. We gave them ours. We gave them garbage." "One species' garbage is another species' treasure," said a quiet voice from the corner of the room. Everyone turned to look at Ambassador Yenthi. She was old now, the same diplomat who had delivered Earth's sentence 50 years ago. She had stopped laughing about humans a long time ago. "That is a human saying," Yenthi continued. "I heard it when I first visited their world. I thought it was pathetic. The desperate philosophy of a weak species trying to find meaning in scraps." She moved to the center of the room, her aged body slow, but her mind sharp. "I was wrong. We were all wrong. We looked at humans and saw everything they lacked. We never stopped to ask what they had. And what is that? Vorn asked. Perspective? Yenthi brought up a holographic display. It showed the Defiance, surrounded by its swarm, hanging in space like a patient predator. Every species in this room developed technology in isolation. We followed our own paths. We made assumptions based on our own biology, our own culture, our own way of thinking. She zoomed in on the ship's hull. Look at this. Kelani metametal, which the Kelani themselves gave up on. Morthok energy systems that the Morthok declared failures. Ireni sensors that my own people threw away as too difficult to calibrate. Separately, these technologies were problems. Together, in human hands, they become something greater than any of us imagined. High Counselor Sephiroth spoke for the first time. He was the eldest member of the Concord, a being so old that no one remembered what species he had originally been. His body had been rebuilt so many times that he was more machine than organic now. Show them the analysis, he said. Yenthi nodded and changed the display. It now showed tactical projections, war simulations, probability calculations, the work of the Concord's finest military minds. We cannot win a direct fight, Yenthi said simply. Not because their ship is more powerful than our combined fleets. It might be, but that is not the real problem. The real problem is that fighting them makes them stronger. She pointed to the simulation. Their shields absorb energy weapons and convert them to power. Their hull repairs itself using captured matter. Their swarm learns from every attack and adapts within seconds. Every tactic we use against them will be studied, countered, and potentially turned against us. Then we do not fight, Sephiroth said. We negotiate. The room erupted in protest. The Krethvani delegate slammed his armored fist against the table. The Irani's crystal body rang like a struck bell. Even species known for their calm nature raised their voices in anger. Negotiate. With a Tier 17 species, they have made demands. They want Tier 1 status. It is absurd. We cannot show weakness. If we give in to humans, every minor species will think they can challenge us. Sephiroth waited for the noise to die down. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried clearly through the chamber. Our first mistake was looking at humans and seeing only their weaknesses. Our second was giving them unlimited access to our technologies while expecting them to remain primitive. He paused. Our third mistake would be assuming they want what we expect them to want. He gestured, and new data appeared on the display. Communications intercepted from Earth. Messages translated from human languages. Reports from the confrontation in the Sol system. They could have destroyed the inspection fleet, Sephiroth said. They did not. They could have demanded tribute, territory, revenge for 50 years of humiliation. They did not. He highlighted several passages in the translated messages. They spoke of hospitals that needed building on distant worlds. Famines that could be ended with better food distribution. Conflicts between species that might be resolved through mediation. They do not want to conquer us, Sephiroth said. They want to help. Silence fell over the chamber. It was not a comfortable silence. Yenthi said quietly, is what terrifies me most, because they all understood what it meant. An enemy who wanted to destroy you could be fought. An enemy who wanted to rule you could be resisted. But a species that wanted to help? A species that looked at the galaxy's problems and saw opportunities instead of obstacles? That was something the Concord had never faced before. They will change everything, Vorn said slowly. If we let them help, if we let them apply their way of thinking to our problems, nothing will be the same. No, Sephiroth agreed. Nothing will be the same. The question is whether that change will be for better or worse. He looked around the room at the gathered representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species. We have dominated this region of space for 11,000 years. We have built something stable, something lasting, and we have done it by keeping lesser species in their place, by maintaining order, by resisting change. His ancient eyes found each delegate in turn. Perhaps it is time to try something different. The vote took 3 days. The arguments were fierce. Old alliances strained. Ancient grudges resurfaced. But in the end, the mathematics were clear. Fighting humanity would be costly, dangerous, and ultimately futile. Helping humanity, or at least allowing them to help others, might lead somewhere new. The Concord granted humanity Tier 1 status. For the first time in 11,000 years, a new species sat among the founders of galactic civilization, and everything began to change. 5 years had passed since humanity took its place among the founding species of the Galactic Concord. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous 1,000 years. Admiral Sarah Chen, who now preferred to be called Director Chen, stood on the observation deck of the Defiance and watched a planet come back to life. Kethvoria Prime had been dying when humanity arrived. 1,000 years of industrial exploitation had poisoned its atmosphere. Acid rain had killed its forests. Toxic waste had turned its oceans into chemical soups where nothing could survive. The Concord had studied the planet, calculated the cost of restoration, and declared it unsalvageable. Humanity disagreed. The technology they used was not originally human. None of their technology was originally human. They used atmospheric processors developed by the Areni, bioremediation systems created by the Morthok, ecological modeling software designed by the Kalani. All of these had been discarded as failures or deemed too difficult to use properly. Human engineers made them work together. Human scientists figured out what the original inventors had missed. Human workers, millions of volunteers from every nation on Earth, came to Kethvoria Prime and labored alongside. Aliens who had never imagined working with a species once classified as garbage. 3 years later, the atmosphere was breathable. Fish swam in the oceans. Plants grew in soil that had been barren for centuries. Children played in fields that their parents had never seen green. "You know," said a voice beside Chen, "the council still does not know what to do with you." Chen turned to find Ambassador Yenthi standing nearby. The Selphorian diplomat had changed over the past 5 years. She no longer carried herself with the casual arrogance of a superior species. She had seen too much. She had learned too much. "They upgraded you to Tier 1, Yenthi continued. "But that classification was designed for species that excelled in 1 or 2 areas. Military strength, scientific advancement, economic power, diplomatic skill. You seem determined to excel in all of them," Chen smiled. "We had good teachers." Teachers. Yenthi made a sound that might have been a laugh. "We threw trash at you. Every piece of debris that fell on Earth carried a lesson." Chen looked out at the healing world below them. "Someone's failed experiment taught us what not to do. Someone's broken engine showed us a design philosophy we had never considered. Someone's discarded art gave us a glimpse of how another species sees beauty." She turned to face Yenthi directly. "You gave us a library, Ambassador. The complete knowledge of 1,000 civilizations scattered across our planet in pieces. We just read it differently than you expected." Below them, a group of local children were being shown around a school that human engineers had built. The Kethvorian species had been considered too primitive for advanced education under Concord standards. Their brains were different. Their learning styles did not match the established methods. So the Concord had given up on them. Human teachers did not give up. They studied how Kethvorians thought. They developed new teaching methods. They built schools that worked with their students instead of against them. The first Kethvorian scientist to earn recognition from the Galactic Academy would graduate next year. She was 12 years old. "What happens now?" Yenthi asked. "Now we keep building." Chen's eyes reflected the green countenance spreading across the world below. "There are 400 species in the Concord. Most of them have problems they have been told are unsolvable." "We disagree," signal came through the ship's communication system. A distress call from a system on the far edge of the galaxy. A species called the Vethkai were facing extinction. A massive cloud of cosmic radiation was moving through their region of space, and their technology could not protect them. The Concord had studied the problem. They had run simulations. They had concluded that nothing could be done. The Vethkai would die, and that was simply the way of the universe. Sad but unavoidable. Chen was already moving toward the command deck. The Concord ruled that situation hopeless, Yenthi called after her. 3 separate scientific committees confirmed there was no solution. Then we will need a 4th opinion. The Defiance powered up its hybrid drive. Around it, the swarm assembled into a fleet of support vessels, medical ships, and construction platforms. What had once been Earth's shield was now the galaxy's emergency response team. They arrived at the Vethkai system 2 days later. The radiation cloud was visible on sensors, a wall of death slowly approaching the inhabited world. The local population had already begun saying goodbye to each other. They had accepted their fate. Humanity did not accept it. Chen stood on her bridge, studying the data. The radiation was intense, far beyond what normal shielding could handle. Concord technology could not stop it. That much was true. But Concord technology was not the only technology humanity had studied. There was a species called the Null, Chen said quietly. They went extinct 40,000 years ago. The Concord found their ruins and declared their technology incomprehensible. She pulled up schematics that human scientists had reconstructed from fragments found in Earth's debris field. Null built shields that did not block energy. They redirected it. They bent space itself to send dangerous radiation somewhere else. Chen smiled. The Concord could not figure out how it worked. We did. The construction ships began to build. The swarm formed into work crews, assembling components faster than any traditional method allowed. Within hours, a network of satellites surrounded the Vethkai world. When the radiation cloud arrived, it did not touch the planet. The null shields bent space around the world, sending the deadly energy flowing around it like water around a stone. The Vethkai watched in amazement as death passed them by. Chen did not stay to accept thanks. There were other problems to solve. Other species who had been told their situations were hopeless. Other worlds that needed help. The Defiance moved on to the next crisis. Years passed. Decades passed. Humanity spread across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as builders. They fixed problems that older species had given up on. They combined technologies that were never meant to work together. They looked at impossible situations and found ways through. The Concord changed. It had to. The old ways of ranking species and dismissing failures could not survive contact with a species that saw failure as just another step toward success. Tier 17 classifications were abolished. Every species, no matter how primitive they seemed, was given the chance to contribute. Many of them surprised everyone, just as humanity had. On Earth, the debris still fell from the sky, but now it was welcomed. Every broken piece was studied, learned from, and improved upon. What had once been intended as a punishment had become humanity's greatest gift. Ambassador Yenthi, who's very old now, visited Earth one final time. She stood with Director Chen, also old, watching children play in fields dotted with alien fragments. "We tried to bury you," Yenthi said. "You tried," Chen agreed. "But you forgot something important about humans." "What is that?" Chen picked up a piece of debris, a fragment of some long-forgotten alien machine. In her hands, it did not look like garbage. It looked like possibility. "We have been climbing out of holes our entire existence," Chen said. "Every time someone pushes us down, we find a way back up. Every time someone tells us something is impossible, we prove them wrong." She looked up at the sky, where human ships now flew alongside vessels from 100 different species. Where the once feared Defiance led a fleet dedicated to helping rather than destroying. Where the garbage world had become the center of a new kind of civilization. "You did not bury us, Ambassador. You gave us the tools to reach the stars." She smiled, and in that smile was everything humanity had ever been. Stubborn, creative, endlessly determined. And now, nothing will ever be the same.